helping me out with that. But I think it's pretty obvious that, as a group of people, we're kind of obsessed with superpowers. I mean, when Endgame does like $2.7 billion in sales, I mean, we really like superheroes. We like moments like that. I think we like watching them use their powers. But you know what? I think we also gravitate because we want to be super. Like we want to stand out. We want to make an impact. And so we hope that we've got some talents and gifts and abilities that we can actually make an impact on this world, like we see the superheroes doing. But I think there's this thing in the back of our minds that sometimes worries that if I don't have a power, not necessarily a superpower, we can debate on whether those are real, but if I don't have something that's going to help me stand out, if I don't have something that's going to get me noticed, that's going to get me followers, that's going to allow me to stand out, am I ever going to be able to make an impact? Because I think even in the church sometimes we can think, well, only God can only use special people. God can only use people have gifts and abilities and talents that allow them to stand out in certain ways. And what about the rest of us who are just, average? What about the rest of us who don't really feel like we have those gifts or those abilities? Is God looking at us going, yeah, you can kind of just exist, but there's not much you bring to the table? And I want to have God answer that question for us tonight. God's got a message for every single one of you, and it's why I get so excited to see so many of you in this room tonight, because the ability for us to make an impact is enormous if we'll just understand what God has to teach us tonight through Luke 5. So we're going to be reading, this is right after Jesus has kind of declared, hey, I'm going to be the Savior of the world. I'm kind of a big deal. I'm God on earth. And he's doing all these things, and he's teaching all these people. And then it says in Luke 5, it says, one day as Jesus was teaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law who had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem were sitting there. So Jesus is teaching, and a bunch of these people are sitting around him, and that may not seem like a big deal. But these Pharisees and teachers of the law, they were enemies of Jesus. See, Jesus was kind of stealing their thunder, and they were not down with that. So they wanted to catch Jesus. They wanted to show people he wasn't worth following. They wanted his attention. And so they were sitting there as his enemies, probably kind of scowling at him. Like just waiting for him to say something stupid, which isn't all that smart when you're talking about God on earth. But in that moment, as they're looking to condemn him, I love what it says next. It says, and the power of the Lord was present for Jesus to heal the sick. So yeah, Jesus had his challenges, but he was up to the challenge. And I think these next few verses, if you want your life to make a difference, if you want to stand out in all the right ways, listen to these next few words, because they have such tremendous wisdom for how you and I can live our lives to make a difference, to make an impact. So check it out. It says in verse 18, some men came carrying a paralytic on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. So some good friends had carried this guy who could not even move, he's a paralytic, to try to get him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to do this because the crowd in the house and around the house was so big, they're like, this ain't stopping us. Look what they did. They went up on the roof and lowered him on his mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd. Can you imagine? You're sitting there with Jesus. It's a packed house. There's people outside even listening to Jesus. And then someone climbs up on your roof, tears a hole in it, and drops someone down. I mean, I don't think State Farm covers that insurance-wise. I mean, I think this is a pretty intense moment, but I love what it says next. It says, when Jesus saw their faith, he said, friend, your sins are forgiven. What an unbelievable moment. These guys loved this guy so much that they would do whatever they could to get him in front of Jesus. They would do whatever they could to bring him in front of Jesus' power. And they had such faith, it says, that Jesus looked at their faith, and his sins were forgiven. His eternity is changed in that moment because of this thing called faith. I love that nothing discouraged them. I love that they ripped open a roof to get him in front of Jesus. And Jesus' response to that faith was powerful. It was life change. And I think what God is revealing to us here is that you don't have to be super. You don't have to have some great talents and powers to be a part of God changing someone's life forever. I love this because it's just them giving what they had and Jesus taking what they had and turning it into a miracle. Doing something next level. We just have to be willing to give what we have to get people in front of a supernatural God and let him do the rest. But we got to have faith. They acted in faith. They acted in trust. That's what led them to act like that. But if we don't have faith, if you don't trust who Jesus says he is, it makes sense if you don't do anything at all. See, faith, trust makes a big difference in your life if you think about it. Let me prove it to you. A couple years back, my brother, myself, and my dad went on a camping trip. And we had this little boat raft thing that we rode down this river, and we found these awesome cliffs to jump off of. They were like 15, 20 feet high. And we were just jumping in, swimming over to this place that had these big boulders, like just underneath the water. But it was perfect because you could kind of climb up on them, and then you could step up onto this landing, and then you could climb up to the cliff and do it all over again. So me and my little brother, he was pretty young at the time, had done this several times. And so he jumps in and swims over. I jump in, I swim over. And as I swim over, like the little landing is about this wide, and you walk up to get back up to the thing. It's not very big at all. So you got water, you got a little bit of land, and then you got wall. And all of a sudden I see my little brother's like this, like he's flailing. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? There's like bees that are swarming him and attacking him on this little landing. He doesn't know what to do. So he decides, wall, little bit of land, bees, water, I'm jumping back in the water. So he jumps, putting his knees out first. And like I said, big, huge boulders right below the water. And he hits hard. And I will never forget for the rest of my life when he got out, he stood up on one of those little rocks, he held up his knee and he said, "Am I okay?" And I didn't see any skin, I just saw into his leg. I saw his bones, I saw his ligaments. It was just split wide open. And so he says, "Am I okay?" And I'm like, "You're fine. You're fine." I'm thinking, heck no, you're not fine. And I'm like, Dad, get over here." "Yeah, you're going to be fine. It's fine. You're okay. Dad, hurry up." And my dad swims over and he turns into the Hulk. He like rips his shirt off, ties it around my brother's knee, and then he like literally throws us both in the boat because we got to get back to our car. And I kid you not, we're in like one of those slow oar boat whatevers, and he's like, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. We're like getting wake. I'm like doing this, and he's like, paddle, and I'm like, I'm in 6th grade. I have no strength, you know? And we're like, we get all the way back. We get in the car. We are breaking speed all over the place. I'm so thankful no police officer saw us, and we get to the hospital. We like bring him in the emergency room, and the nurses take over, and the doctor takes over, and they clean it all out, and they do, and they get in sort of, and he's okay. Whew, that was a lot. I was very excited. So, why did we respond that way? In that moment, what happened? That we kicked into gear, and my dad turned into the Hulk, and we were doing whatever we can to get him to the hospital. Well, two things. First, we understood what was at stake. If my brother's knee stays open like that, he can bleed out, he could have a terrible infection, he could lose the function of his leg, he could get an infection that kills him. If we don't take care of it, if we're like, hey, we're going to jump a few more times, Luke, just hang out. We would be idiots because we wouldn't realize what's at stake. So what was at stake drove us to act, but you know what also drove us to act? Faith. Trust that there were nurses and there were doctors waiting for us that could do what we couldn't do to help my brother be okay. We understood what was at stake, and we had faith in those who could provide what we couldn't. And here's what I want you to hear tonight. Every single day you wake up, Christ follower, you have to understand what's at stake for your family, for your friends, for our world that is dying literally in eternal death without the hope of Jesus Christ. You have to understand what's at stake. Eternity is at stake, and you and I have the answer, and what the answer is putting our faith in Jesus, who's the one that we see in this story transforming this guy's life. We have that same powerful one who is with us and says, just give the little that you have. Carry people to me and watch me do the rest. But here's the problem, is so many of us aren't taking any steps to bring people to Jesus because we just don't have faith that it's going to make a difference. Satan is attacking us. Our enemy is attacking us at our trust level. Because if we don't trust Jesus, we're not going to do anything for Jesus. But if we trust him, God's going to do supernatural things through us. My dad and I had faith that a doctor could help my brother. Y'all, we have faith in the healer of healers that can change eternities. And we need to actively be carrying people to Jesus. See, when we trust in God's supernatural power, our actions, our response, what we do will make an eternal difference in the tiny little things that we do every day. Jesus says, and God says to us in Ephesians 3:20 that he'll do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine through the big and little things that we get to do with each other. So making a big difference in our world isn't about your gifts and talents. Instead, it's about giving what we do have to help people meet Jesus, whose supernatural power can change them forever. That's why we talk about this place being a bridge. We want to be used as God's bridge to help people connect to eternal hope and life. But you know what I also love about this story? We see their faith, but we also see that just because you are trying to do something good doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Sometimes we buy into this lie that if I'm following Jesus and I'm trying to do good, it's all going to be good. It's all going to be easy. That's not what happened to these guys. They had the crowd. They had the roof. They had all these things that were getting in their way of trying to do something good, but they dealt with those crowds by forcing through. And I want to ask you tonight, what's the crowd for you? What's standing in your way of actually living a powerful supernatural life where God does amazing things through you? I think for a lot of you, it's just straight up your laziness with God. God's sitting there saying in James 4:8, draw near to me and I will draw near to you. But we don't got time for that. We got time to Netflix binge. We got time to scroll and scroll and scroll on our phones. We got time to worry about all kinds of things, but we got no time for God. We got no time for him to work in us so he can work through us. That's the crowd for a lot of you. You're just distracted. You're obsessed with the video game. You're obsessed with your online image. You've convinced yourself you don't know how to connect to God, and so you don't even try. You don't even ask for help. The crowd has kept you from being a part of supernatural change in your life. And it's time to realize what's at stake here. It's time to realize what's at stake for you and everyone you interact with. Because when we realize what is at stake and the difference that Jesus can make, it's going to drive us into our relationship with God. And it's going to drive us to want to tell everyone we know about how they can have a relationship with God. So again, what is standing in your way? What's the crowd? What's the roof that you need to tear open? Is it explaining the gospel and you just don't know how? Well, then come to us. We'll teach you how to explain it through something called the bridge, which is so easy but so profound. Maybe for you, you're like, I don't know how to pray. I don't know how to talk to God. Well, we would love to talk to you and walk you through how you have a relationship with God and how you talk to him. Maybe it's you're just not feeling it. That's the roof. So many of us chase feelings. We chase feelings, and because we chase feelings, we find ourselves down, and we find ourselves running on empty and feeling like everything's worthless because we're not living on truth that never changes. We're living on feelings that change all the stinking time. Do you know what I'm talking about? And so maybe the roof for you is, I got to stop following my feelings, and I got to start following God's truth. I don't know what it is for you. But here's the things. When we realize what is at stake, and the difference that Jesus can make, we will fight through. You guys got to keep that in your mind. Realize what is at stake for your family and friends and you. Realize what difference he can make. Because if you're thinking on that truth, then even when you don't feel it, you're going to be like, but no, it's worth it. It's like the soldier out on the battlefield who knows that he's taken on enemy fire, but he sees his other guy on his team, and he knows, I have to go for my fellow soldier. I have to run to him, even if I don't feel like it, even if I feel scared, because I know what's at stake. I need to get him off the battlefield so he can get healed, and we have that kind of thing, but it's an eternal kind of thing. So we got to remember what's at stake and the difference Jesus can make so that we can get out there and have faith like these guys do. Now, I love that this is in a moment where Jesus does the greatest miracle we will ever see. We already read about it. You know, sometimes we think great miracles are when someone gets healed from cancer, and that's true. When someone is a paralytic that now can walk, that would be a huge miracle. But the truth is, all those people who get healed eventually die. We all will die. What's the greater miracle? Is that Jesus can forgive sins, that we can be reconnected with God, and that we can have the promise of eternity in heaven with Jesus and each other. That's the greater miracle, and I want you to understand that's the first thing that happens. What happens to our soul is far more important than what happens to our body. because our soul is eternal. And so each and every day that you live out who Jesus has called you to be by serving people, by praying for people, by being a good friend, and by telling them the story of what Jesus is doing in your life, every single day you are extending an opportunity for a miracle of a heart transformation to happen in their lives. There is nothing better to live for. There's nothing better you could give your summer to. Trust me. And Jesus says, it's not about you having great talents, it's about you trusting me and let me use you to do great things. He's the one who's supernatural. Now, what I love, if we go on, look at verse 21. It says, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, who is this fellow? Who talks like that? This fellow who speaks blasphemy. In other words, is saying the wrongest thing he could ever say, essentially. Who can forgive sins but God alone? And you know what? They're right. Only God can forgive sins. They were right about that, but they were wrong about Jesus. Jesus was God on earth, so he did have authority to do this. He proved that with his death and his resurrection. But I just want you to understand, in this whole bringing Jesus to the world thing and living a life that really matters, you're going to have skeptics. You're going to have people that deny the truth that you talk about. You're going to have people who are like, you're full of it, whatever. That's not true. And it's not up to you whether they're going to receive it. It's up to you if you're going to share it. Jesus even had people who rejected his message. So even if you share it perfectly with someone, it doesn't mean they're going to respond the way you hope. But just because someone turns away your invitation to save their life for eternity doesn't mean you quit offering it, right? If someone's drowning in front of you and you throw them something to help them and they're like, no, I don't want it. You don't go, okay, cool. See you later, drown. You're like, you try to throw them something else. You try to throw them something else. You try to do whatever you can to get them to take it. We got to persevere even when people doubt who Jesus is. Now, I just want to read the rest of the story as kind of my close. It says, Jesus knew what they were thinking and asked, why are you thinking these things in your hearts? Which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. He said to the paralyzed man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. Immediately he stood up in front of them, took what he had been lying on, and went home, praising God. Everyone was amazed and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, we have seen remarkable things today. Because of their faith in carrying this man to Jesus, his spiritual life was transformed. His physical life was transformed. And his even emotional and relational life, as he could now get up and interact with people, as Jesus literally said, he called him friend. And that's what I want you to see as you carry people to Jesus. It's not just a spiritual thing. You're going to see God provide for them physically. You're going to see God provide for them emotionally. You're going to see friends who thought they were worthless, thought they were no good, thought they were unlovable, to find out that they are loved by God, that they are loved infinitely and always accepted and welcomed into the family of God. And you're going to start to see joy fill their life where it used to be darkness. See, Jesus is about changing our life forever, but it starts now. So give all yourself to this and watch what God can do, because through your faith, your trust in God that leads to action, that makes you take steps out, God can bring spiritual, physical, and emotional healing. The question is, do you trust Jesus' power? Ultimately, if you're not doing anything, it comes down to this: you don't trust him. If you trust him and you take steps and steps out to defend that person who everyone's ripping down, or to pray for that person when it feels awkward, to take the risk, whatever it is that God's calling you to, you can trust that God is doing things that are greater than you could ever understand. And you may not see it in that moment. You may not see it for a long time. But I'll tell you, I know God's going to do powerful things through you. But you got to trust him and take the step. Well, we've had some students who took that step. There are a bunch of students, and they can start making their way up here, that went on a mission trip with Jack. There's a few that got to come tonight. From our trip, there was a group of them that went, and I asked them if they would come and they would just share what it was like to answer the call from Jesus to go, and what it was like to offer what they had, and what did God do through it. And so we just got some questions coming out here, y'all. You can grab a seat. We've just got some questions that we're going to ask them and allow them to share what it's like to kind of step out and let God use you, even if you're not quite sure about it. So if we want to go ahead and jump in, and I think the first question we had talked about was like, what made you decide that you wanted to go on a trip like this? Is that where we want to start?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's jump in there.
Well, for me, I wanted to go on this trip specifically is because I didn't do anything in the church before, and like I wasn't participating, and I wanted to actually like do something. And I thought if I was gonna do something, then like I wanted it to look big, but that wasn't. Whenever I got on the trip, I knew that wasn't the purpose, and that the purpose was just help people out and do what we were called for, because like what God told us to do.
That's good.
Hi.
Welcome, Maggie. So the question is like, why did you decide to come on the trip? Yeah. Raina, if you want to.
Yeah.
While she's.
Okay. So I'm Raina, and I work with Encounter in the college ministry. And so Jack had called me up earlier in the semester and was like, hey, you have this opportunity to go. And that's just it. You have an opportunity to go. One of the things that Ernie has talked about in our college ministry is trust the Lord enough with your name, and he'll put it on the map. So that was kind of just the way that I approach missions and the way that I've seen the Lord work. And there's no other place I'd rather be than fighting for my brothers and sisters in another country.
Kind of the same thing as Raina said. I had never gotten to go on a mission trip before because life happens. And so I actually had a free summer to get to go. And it wasn't even like a hesitation. They announced it. I was like, all right, done, signed up. Didn't kind of think or meditate on it too much, which might not have been the best idea. But it worked out, so it was good.
Yeah, and for me, I think going on a trip like this, it forces you out of your comfort zone. And by signing up and putting your name on the dotted line, there's like an end. Like I'm gonna be forced out of my comfort zone. I got a 6-week or 6-month ramp before I'm out of my comfort zone, but I've set the date. I'm going. And so for me, when I first went on my first mission trip, it was like that's the reason I went, because I needed to get out of my comfort zone. And so I knew if I put something on the calendar, there was no backing out of it. And it helped me to kind of wade out into the deep end slowly, instead of sometimes jumping in all of a sudden can seem tough.
So we talked about the crowd tonight. We talked about the things that can get in the way of us actually doing what we know we should do, carrying people to Jesus. And so did any of you guys, after you signed up or even while you were signing up, did you have any of those moments, or even on the trip, where you're like, man, I just don't want to do this? And it was tempting you to just, back away and not do what God had called you to do. Did you see the crowd moments, the distraction moments coming at all?
Well, the main nervousness, wasn't about, going on the trip and, helping clean up stuff or any of that. It was mainly about sharing the gospel, because I'm not used to doing that, and that's sort of, out of my comfort zone. So, but, whenever I did it, it was, became easier and easier, but, whenever you, first start, or you, first start talking to a person, you start getting really nervous. But it just goes away after you, start having a real conversation with them.
Yeah. I think that's so important to realize, sharing the gospel isn't sharing some random information. It's sharing a story. It's sharing a story of God's love for us. It's sharing a story of how God's love changed us, and it's inviting them to be changed as well. So I love that you said that so wisely. As you get a chance to get in a personal conversation and you just try, it starts to become something that becomes more natural. But you got to try, right?
Yeah.
You can't get there without stepping out.
Yeah, and one of the easiest things is if you ask their name first and you talk to them by name, it becomes easier for you, because it makes a personal connection for people. If you don't say their name, then there's oh, they're just here to just talk about something random. But if you say their name and you are active in the conversation, then they'll hone in more on what you're saying.
That's cool. Anybody else feel any just opposition when God was saying step out, feeling I'm not sure?
Yeah, that was the whole trip for me. So I speak zero Spanish, and Mexico only speaks Spanish. So that was something that was really outside of my comfort zone, especially knowing how Thomas said, you're going to go out and be evangelizing to people. And that was something that I had never done before. And so that was super scary for me. And I remember the first day we went, and I was in split into smaller groups. And we went up to 3 people, and all of them were no, I'm okay. I don't want to hear about it. I'm okay, well, can we pray for you? Anything we can specifically? And everybody said no. And so we left that first day, and I was dang, that's rough. So second day, I was super like not wanting to be there, not even gonna lie. And then I was just like, you know what? Stop being afraid, stop being a wimp, and just go do it. So I did it, and it was terrifying the entire time, but that's fine because it wasn't me who was speaking; it was God. And so that was super evident, and how all of that was handled. Because my brain went off, like I can't tell you what I said, but it was really cool to see that. And then just like the first night we were there, Jack was like, "Do you want to lead worship tomorrow?" I was like, "Oh, okay." In Spanish? No. So like the whole time it was just God saying like, "How much do you trust me? How much are you gonna let your fear dictate you this trip?" And so that was something super big for me. It was like how Jack said, like stepping out of your comfort zone a lot.
So cool.
I think for me, the big barrier is like I've got 3 incredible girls at home and an incredible wife that I could spend a week with. And, you know, what I do for work, it's still there. I still have to come back and get things done. But if I don't model what I'm trying to instruct and teach my kids, if I don't model that myself, I'm not a very good teacher. And I can't very well come up here and tell you all to share the gospel if I'm not doing it myself. And so for me, I'm like, I need to walk the walk. I'm not just going to talk the talk. And so I feel like it's really important in each of our lives. There's moments where we have to decide, are we going to walk the walk, or are we just going to talk the talk and let those barriers keep us from living the life that God wants us to live?
Yeah, I mean, I think I hear in all y'all's stories, like, and y'all don't miss this. Like, it'd be really easy to get distracted or start thinking about other things, and that's exactly what our enemy would hope for, because what we're talking about is that person who's drowning spiritually and being able to throw them a line. And that's what y'all spent your week doing, and some wanted nothing to do with it. And that's what's hard about it, is like when they want nothing to do with it, it hurts. And it, you know, the enemy is trying to get you to just stop. But then there's moments where something cool happens, where lights do go on, where you see that person connecting with what you're saying. So I'd love to hear, where did you see God break through on this trip? What are some of the things that you saw God doing through your obedience, even when it was hard?
I would probably say like it was incredible to worship and partner with our church there and the community that we were able to build with them. But even just in the way that like leading the girls and getting to like know the team, like seeing the Lord work not only like within the people that we were working with, but within our team was really incredible, and just really refreshing to see that, no, God, like, yes, we may be going out to love and serve others, but we are being loved and served in the same way. So it's just really sweet to see the church and the body of the church on a grander scale.
Yeah, God's working all around this globe, like all the time, and it's easy just to think about me and my world. That's so true. How else did y'all see God break through this week and encouraging people in whatever way?
I'll go if y'all don't want to go. Okay, while you're thinking, 2 big stories for me. Just sharing the gospel. One of the first times we shared the gospel in a group, we got to talk to a guy that worships Satan. Was super cool. I don't get to meet very many people that worship demons. And that was just super. I was like, you know, you're walking around in a park and you're wanting to share the gospel with people, and I just kind of didn't expect that. I kind of thought maybe this was going to be a weird, awkward conversation, but this like threw me for a loop. But the guy really engaged in conversation with us, and we just really struck a chord, and he ended up trusting in Christ. Like, he ended up moving from someone that worshipped a demon to worshiping the one true God. Like, that was just an incredible moment to see just such a total 180 in this guy's life just from a 20, 30-minute conversation. It was super encouraging to see that, and we didn't do anything like crazy. We just talked to him like a normal person. So that was really cool. And then just being able to work alongside the church there. We did kind of mission work together at an orphanage, and we worked alongside this church. And y'all, like, this is like, we in America do a really good job of like going on our weekends and working for Habitat for Humanity, or going to do a little project together. But that's just not a common thing in Mexico. Like that's unheard of. Churches don't go and do that. And so this was really a big first for them as a church to go out and serve a local ministry, to serve in their community. And so it was a big deal for them to bring their people at their church to do this, and we got to work alongside them. So it's just really cool to be able to work alongside people that don't speak the same language and have a common purpose, and how that united us and made a huge difference.
Y'all, how many times have you said, oh, I'm not going to invite that person, they'd never be interested. Oh, I'm not going to talk to them because they wouldn't care about that. Oh, there's no way they would ever want to hear anything about Jesus. And we decide for them. And then you got a guy who, the first time you meet him, is like, I worship a deep, like, and you would assume, oh, this is going to end either abruptly or badly. And he's the one going, yes, yes. So please don't say no for your friends. Even if they've said no themselves several times, a loving person just keeps throwing them the line and saying, hey, I'm not here to force anything on you. I'm just here to tell you, Jesus keeps changing me. Jesus keeps giving me hope. Jesus' love is enough for me. Jesus is giving me direction. I'd love to talk about it anytime you want to. You don't have to force it on them. I know, Raina, you've lived on at TCU's campus. You just graduated. She's going to be on staff with us next year as one of our residents. But, TCU is a place that there's some who know Jesus. There's a whole lot of people who are like, get that out of here. And you probably run into some people who are like, I want nothing to do with that. How do you overcome that and in a world like just down the street, not in Mexico, but just down the street, how do you keep sharing the gospel? And what do you see God doing through that?
Yeah, it's super interesting just, I think, because I didn't grow up in the church. My family aren't even believers. So, like, going from school to going to home and, Jesus is nowhere near it as far as, like, sharing the gospel. But I think it's one of the most beautiful mercies of the Lord to understand that at the end of the day, like, it's not me that's going to change my friends' hearts or the people that I sit across from in the cafeteria when, hey, you know what, I had an early breakfast today. I'm going to go sit down with somebody. I'm going to pick someone, just get to know them and start a conversation. But at the end of the day, like, it does make those conversations easier, even if they completely reject me, because I would rather them reject me than the Lord, because at the end of the day, God's pursuing them regardless of whatever just came out of my mouth. I'm just called to be faithful.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear from each one of you. What would you challenge these students? You've had an experience. God sent you out. God did some crazy good things. You were challenged along the way. But from what you experienced, what would be your challenge? How would you encourage these students to take steps in their daily life based on what God taught you through this trip and in your walk with Jesus? So who wants to go first?
I would say or encourage you to live boldly. I know that's kind of cheesy, but it's super true. So, like, one really big takeaway for me, like, this past week was worshiping with the people at Selah, and them, like, whenever we would lead in English, them, like, me knowing that they had no idea what I was saying, but they knew that the Lord was good, and they knew that He was sovereign. And so, like, seeing that contagious worship, and it wasn't just during singing a song, it was in how they greeted you, how they came up to you and gave you a hug, even though they had no idea or even a clue at what your name was, but how so ready they were to serve us, even though we were there to serve them, like, in theory, was super inspiring for me. So just, I encourage you to live boldly and let your courage be more than your fear, because God is bigger than your fear.
I would encourage you just to really reach out and talk to people. I think we sometimes overthink our role in sharing the gospel, and if you've traveled to other countries, you realize people are the same everywhere you go. They want someone that'll listen to them, that'll hear their story, that will talk to them like a real person. And I think we overcomplicate sharing the gospel, and we don't need to. So I would really just encourage you, like, there's people around you, there's people in your life, like, talk to them and actually listen to their story and how they're doing and look them in the eyes. Like, we all want that. We all desire that connection, but we're not willing to put the effort in to do it.
So I sort of think to like be prepared for someone to say no, because like there are always going to be people who like don't believe in our faith or like what we believe in. But I mean, like the worst thing they can do to you is say no. I mean, like that shouldn't put you down or anything. That just should like inspire you to try to reach more people, because like if someone says no, that like how do I explain it? It's like they don't want you to like get into their life, and they don't want God into their life because like they want to make other choices. But like if you show them the way, then like and keep on trying to pursue them, then they'll sort of like come around you, and that's what God is trying to get people to do. Just like evangelize more, talk with people more, and try to make people don't try to make people say yes, but like give them the chance.
I think for me, it was, we kind of talked about it earlier, just some of the hardships going into the trip. Like, get in the Word, y'all. Like, this is the living bread of life, and you can't go out and love others unless you are pouring into yourself. Like, take the time to be in the Word, because that was one of the things I think I hit a wall going into the trip. And, you know, Lord, how am I going to do this? I'm supposed to be a leader, but really understanding, like, I have to be filled up by God and by truth over all of the lies that are going on in my head, all of the lies that I'm seeing on a daily basis, to know that you are sovereign and you are true. So all I have to do is go out and say what I know is true. So get in the Word, ask questions. That's one of the biggest things I think I struggled with at this time in my life, is like, ask questions. Because there are people around you that are going to love and serve you and be able to pour that into you, and you don't have to know everything. I'm not going to know everything until I get to the gates of heaven. So find truth where you have it and be prepared to ask for help, because there are people that are going to love and serve you and point you in the right direction.
Well, we just hope that you hear from their story that you have something tremendous to offer to this community. And that's the little that you have. I have a little, they have a little. But when we offer it to a supernatural God, he can do a lot. One of my favorite authors and speakers would always talk about a scalpel. You know, a scalpel by itself, it's a medical tool, but a scalpel by itself, all it can do is sit and do nothing on a table. But when it's in the hands of a skilled surgeon, it can perform heart surgery. It can change a life. And that's what we want to be. We just want to be in the hands of God so he can use us, so we can tell other people where to find life. So if you're wondering what that looks like, just listen to their advice. Be bold. Get in the Word. Run after God. And then love people like God loved you. And we're here to help you learn and live that out. So I'm going to close this in prayer. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to come ask one of us. But after we get done with prayer, I got a couple quick announcements. So just sit tight for a second. God, thank you so much for calling us.